It's fortunate that I would be taking a look at TNG's episode The Enemy so close to my breakdown in the Dominion lore series of The Die Is Cast. In the DS9 episode, the Romulans were starting to share technology like it was going out of style, even if it was black market antiquated tech. Conversely, today we see how secretive they are in TNG, so much that they would blow up their own ships or even let their own people die. As I discussed, in this episode we will be taking a look at how the Romulans are basically nothing like we see them in DS9. In the episode in question, again the TNG episode The Enemy, Geordi, Worf, and Riker have beamed down to a planet on the Federation side of the Romulan neutral zone to investigate an intercepted distress call from a Romulan ship on that planet. Per the dialogue, we gain that the planet is in a perfect strategic position should the Romulans decide to attack the Federation. The away team do find a craft on the inhospitable planet, but it has been destroyed by some form of explosive, one so powerful that it renders any attempt to use the technology of the ship fruitless. Again, it's curious, at this time the Romulans are willing to destroy their own craft and die on a hellhole to prevent being captured or allow the Federation to get any part of their technology. But then you present the unknown of the Dominion and now we have a new ballgame where tech, even if it's out of date tech, is being shared. This episode, generally, gives me a feel of the original series with a next generation spin, if I'm being honest. To clarify, there are two plots that I'll be taking a look at in this episode. Within the episode, they interweave. You see one plot and then it moves to the next, but I'm going to be looking at each individually. So while the episode interweaves them, I won't. Focusing on the planet first, the away team does find one Romulan soldier. While getting him back to the beam-out coordinates, Geordi, for some reason, goes missing. With only a brief window open for transport, the team beams back with the Romulan, leaving LaForge behind. The reason he was left behind is because, unfortunately, Geordi fell into a cave. Now that's just bad luck. He finally gets out of the cave, but is ambushed by another Romulan. Ultimately, the Centurion does take Geordi prisoner, which is easy to do when you have a disruptor pointed at him. The two would engage in some banter, giving some back and forth, seeing who has the bigger appendage, but ultimately, rocks would fall down and hit the Centurion. He would be saved by Geordi, but then immediately the Romulan still pulls his weapon on the man. I do want to take a moment to address this action. The show portrays this as something diabolical, something evil, but here's the rub. As far as that Centurion is concerned, Geordi could have saved him so the Federation would have a prisoner who is alive that they can interrogate. Just because someone saves you, especially a person who you're pretty sure is going to be an enemy in the near future, doesn't make them altruistic. So while Geordi finds this to be unbelievable, it really only makes sense to most of us. And I'm not sure that Geordi wouldn't have done the same thing if it had been reversed. He would at least have kept his phaser ready in case something else happens. Moving on, the two would have another interesting conversation showing that the Romulans still have their mightier-than-thou attitude and the Federation is still pretty naive. The Romulan talks about how humanity will go extinct and the Star Empire will rule the galaxy, which of course seems insane to Geordi. The conversation even moves into cultural ideals, the Romulan aghast that someone would be blind and still allowed to live. He even points out this is why the Federation will lose, focusing on people who should just be tossed aside and using those resources to build the Empire. I do wonder if the Centurion wasn't more under high stress, young, and perhaps from the backwater parts of the Star Empire. This outlook certainly matches the theme of the ancient times with Rome, Greece, Sparta, and such, but feels antithetical to what we see of Romulans in the original series and even Tomalak. Again, I could be wrong on that, but it does seem somewhat out of place. Regardless, the two will have to work together if they want to survive. The planet itself is beginning to wreak havoc on both of them. The Centurion will have to be the eyes of Geordi because his visor no longer works, and Geordi will have to help him walk because his legs don't work. In fact, it gets so bad that Geordi gives up, and it's the Centurion that pushes him to find a way to identify where the probe that was sent by Enterprise is. Oh yeah, the Enterprise sends down a probe to try to help Geordi find his way home. That would be important to know. The Centurion would talk Geordi back into wanting to live, and Geordi would explain how they need to build a device so that they can find the probe itself. A friendship really born out of necessity, where both would die if they didn't help each other. They would be able to construct the device, and ultimately both would help each other get to the probe. They would be beamed back aboard, and Picard would tell the Centurion that he wouldn't be harmed. Not being believed, of course. It's only after Geordi states that he would guarantee that no harm would come to the Romulan that the Centurion begins to trust the humans. Even though technically this could all still be a trap, I mean, Geordi could be lying. The Centurion would be beamed back to the ship, and that would end the first plot, which is two soldiers trying to survive. Honestly, what I enjoyed about this plot specifically is it's a look at the front lines. It has nothing to do with the politics or the war, it's the soldiers. We'll take a look at the politics and what the higher-ups were doing after this. Hey guys, if you like this channel and want to ensure that I continue to make videos that you want to watch, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/Lore Reloaded. If you hate Patreon, then check the links below to give via PayPal. You can set up monthly or one-time events. The only way I'm going to be able to make these great videos is from support from viewers like you. Thanks for your consideration. As I stated, we were taking a look at the front lines, just two soldiers. But generally, they don't get to decide what happens when it comes to the politics. Who does would be the captains of the ships, as well as the diplomats and of course the admirals. And to get a better look at that, we'll have to take a look at what was occurring on the Enterprise during this time. Things couldn't be more different. As I stated, the Enterprise arrived at the planet due to intercepted distress signals. This was not only to help anyone that needed it, but also to investigate why the Romulans were there. The fear of a Romulan war definitely overrode most concerns for the health of the soldier they're trying to save. Almost immediately after being brought back to the Enterprise, Riker demands to be able to interrogate the Romulan. The Doctor seems taken aback, but Picard points out that this isn't unreasonable. You can even see in Riker's questions that they seem couched in concern, but he's really trying to gain information on what the Romulans are up to. I know that I've talked about how out of character the Federation is in the Dominion War, at least the early stages, but the actions here don't seem as bad. The Federation is still wanting to help the Romulan soldiers, they're just fearful and cautious. They're trying to figure out what the Romulans are up to without starting the war themselves. In the Dominion War, the Federation just seems to either want to start a fight, pretend to back off completely, or let others do their dirty work. In this episode, it feels like Starfleet is really trying to navigate the entire thing and balance the two ideals. Things become more tense when a Romulan warbird is detected and sends back a message stating that they have entered the neutral zone and will be in Federation space shortly. Picard would confront the commander, Tomalak, and ultimately the commander would apologize, stating that he would have contacted the Enterprise had he been aware of them. While this seems deceptive, it's honestly nothing more than what we would expect from a Federation counterpart. I could see Picard doing the exact same thing and meaning well. The Enterprise could have received a distress signal, like it did last time, and enter into the neutral zone wanting to help. Picard orders the Romulan vessel to not pass the neutral zone, and it seems like Tomalak will abide for now, which is more than the Enterprise did last time, but let's not get into that. The episode infers that the Enterprise will meet the warbird at the neutral zone. However, the Enterprise doesn't leave, they stay attempting to find Geordi and get information from the Romulan. When it is apparent that the vessel has not arrived yet, and Tomalak calls them out on it, Picard advises that they are trying to find their crewmen and points out that the Romulan was in their territory. Tomalak calls it a navigation error, but no one is believing that. It's also extremely improbable that a ship would have such a navigation error that they pass through the neutral zone into Federation space. Ultimately, the Enterprise does not show up at the rendezvous point, and the Romulan dies. This all could have been prevented if the Enterprise had met up with the warbird and allowed them to take the prisoner. Now, I do know that there is a Worf subplot and he had the ability to save them, but we're not delving into that in this episode, maybe at a later time. When it comes to meeting the warbird, I'm of two minds. I do think that the best thing would have been Picard to meet up with the Romulan warbird and give over the soldier. It's the best way to prevent war. It's the Starfleet thing to do. But I understand why he didn't, especially when he was looking for one of his own men. The Romulans are in their space, and this is a time of tension. This may be war. So him wanting to interrogate the Romulan, even at the expense of the Romulan's life, is reasonable, and I hate to say that. But ultimately, as stated, the Romulan would die and the Warbird would cross into Federation space. Tomalak would be angered and states that many will die now at this point. It looks like there's about to be a lot of death when the Enterprise receives the beacon from Geordi and the Centurion. Picard takes a leap of faith and lowers his shields to beam the crew up. He would then beam over the Centurion, and this gesture would prevent war and end up saving both of their men. Ironically, Picard says he'll escort the Warbird back to the neutral zone, only to never actually escort it. Both ships would leave in opposite directions. But the reuse of an asset and hoping no one notices aside, this would be one small step forward for trust. However, every small step forward comes at the price of a large step behind. We'll see the Romulans again when they are trying to gain an edge against the Federation in TNG's episode Tin Man.